Hashtag the night the train stopped moving. He said, I'd jumped out of planes. I'd been in bar fights in 3 countries. I once ate gas station sushi on a dare. He paused. He looked at the needle in my hand. But this is where I draw the line. I didn't laugh. I wanted to. I really wanted to. It was somewhere between Kansas City and Denver. I know that because I'd been watching the darkness outside the window for about 2 hours, trying to figure out where the flat black of the land ended and the flat black of the sky began. It's one of those stretches of America that makes you feel very small and very awake at the same time. The kind of night where the train feels like the only moving thing in the universe. I was in the dining car, which, at 1:30 in the morning, was really just a car with fluorescent lights and the ghost of someone's reheated lasagna. I'd been traveling for almost 18 hours at that point. Chicago to Los Angeles. I had a paperback face down on the table, a cup of tea that had gone cold, and absolutely no intention of sleeping. I should tell you something about me. I don't sleep well on trains. I know that sounds strange, a lot of people find them soothing, all that rhythm, all that rocking. For me, it's the opposite. I lie there and I listen to every single sound and I think about every single thing I've ever done wrong. So I was in the dining car. Voluntarily. At 1:30 in the morning. With cold tea. And that's when Marcus sat down across from me. I didn't know his name was Marcus yet. I just knew he was tall, that kind of tall where you notice it even when someone's sitting down, and that he had the particular look of a man who was trying very hard to appear casual and failing at it completely. He sat down, he put his hands flat on the table, and he stared at them like they'd personally offended him. I looked up from my book. He didn't look at me. Long night? I said. Because what else do you say at 1:30 in the morning in the middle of nowhere? You could say that. He exhaled. Long and slow. Then he looked up, and I noticed his face was not pale, exactly, but careful. The way faces get when someone is managing something internally and doing it with effort. You're the one who mentioned being a nurse. Earlier. In the observation car. I had mentioned that. To someone else. Which meant he'd been listening, or someone had told him, or, well. Small train. Nurse practitioner, technically, I said. But yes. He nodded like this confirmed something. Then he reached into the pocket of his jacket and put a small orange prescription bottle on the table between us. I missed my shot, he said. 2 days ago. I was supposed to do it myself, but I couldn't. And now I'm starting to feel it. I looked at the bottle. Looked at him. He had the kind of eyes that are very direct when they're not avoiding something, and right now they were doing both at once, looking straight at me and somehow also looking away. What is it? I said. He told me. It was a biologic medication. Subcutaneous. Self-administered, usually, but he'd been traveling and anxious and he'd put it off and then put it off again, and now it had been 2 days past his scheduled dose and his joints were starting to ache in that specific way he recognized, the way that meant the inflammation was waking back up. Do you have the supplies? I said. Alcohol swabs, the pen or syringe, everything? In my bag. He paused. I've done it before. I know how. I just can't do it to myself. I never could. My wife usually, he stopped. Something moved across his face. She's not here. I sat with that for a second. Okay, I said. Let's go get your bag. Now, I want to pause here and tell you something, because I think about this a lot. There's a particular kind of vulnerability in needing a medical thing done and not being able to do it yourself. It's not weakness. It's actually one of the most human things there is. We are not, as a species, designed to pierce our own skin calmly. The fact that some people can do it, diabetics who check their glucose 6 times a day, people who administer their own injections on a schedule, that's not the norm. That's learned courage, practiced over and over until the nervous system finally agrees to cooperate. Marcus had learned it once. And then he'd been alone on a train for 2 days and the learned courage had quietly packed its bags and left. I understand that. More than I probably let on. We went to his compartment. It was a sleeper's small, the way all sleeper compartments are small, with that very specific train smell of recycled air and metal and something faintly like coffee even though there was no coffee anywhere nearby. The window was a black mirror. Outside, the darkness was still doing its thing. He had a small travel case organized, I noticed. The kind of organized that comes from doing something regularly. The alcohol swabs were in a little zip pouch. The auto-injector pen was in its case, still cold from wherever he'd been keeping it. He'd been keeping it properly, that was good. These medications need to stay refrigerated, and of course you are, he said. Here's the thing about telling people you're a nurse on a train that's been stopped in a snowstorm for half an hour. They immediately start doing inventory. You can see it, a quick mental scan, top to bottom, checking for anything that might qualify as a medical situation. Daniel's inventory took about 4 seconds. Then his expression changed in a way that was almost funny. I've been putting off a B12 shot for 3 weeks, he said. Asterisk, my doctor keeps calling. I keep not going, asterisk. I looked at him. I'm not afraid of needles, he added, with the particular emphasis of a man who was very afraid of needles. Of course not, I said. He smiled. It was a good smile. The kind that starts slow and then arrives all at once. I told him I had my kit. I told him I could help him, if he wanted. I also told him he absolutely did not have to, that this was a train and not a clinic and there was zero pressure, and that his doctor would probably survive another 3 weeks of unanswered calls. He thought about it for a moment. How bad is it? He asked. The shot. Honestly, I said. The anticipation is always worse than the thing. He considered that. Outside, the snow was coming down harder. The dining car was warm and smelled like coffee and something faintly metallic, the particular smell of train heating systems that I've never been able to identify but always recognize. Okay, he said. Asterisk, yeah. Okay, asterisk. I went to get my kit from my compartment. Walking through the train cars while it was stopped felt strange, the usual gentle swaying was gone, and everything was very still and very quiet. A few passengers were asleep. A child was drawing something in a small notebook. An older woman was knitting, completely unbothered, with the serene composure of someone who has outlived several train delays. I found myself thinking, on the way back, about the first time I ever gave an intramuscular injection. Not in a clinical setting, I mean the very first time, in school, on a practice pad that was supposed to simulate muscle tissue but felt nothing like it. My hands shook. My instructor stood next to me and said, very calmly, the needle doesn't know you're nervous. Which is true. Which is also one of the most useful things anyone has ever told me. I came back to the dining car. Daniel was sitting up a little straighter. Preparing himself. That's what people do, they brace. I set my kit on the table and opened it. Kept my movements slow and deliberate. Not hurried, not clinical efficient. Just easy. The way you move when you want the room to be calm. Can I ask you something? He said, watching me. Sure. Asterisk, does it bother you? Doing this? The needles, all of it, asterisk. I thought about that honestly. No, I said. Asterisk, it used to. When I was new. Now it's more like. I'm aware of it. The weight of it. Someone is trusting you with something they can't do themselves. That doesn't bother me. It makes me careful, asterisk. He was quiet for a moment. That's a good answer, he said. B12 cyanocobalamin is typically given as an intramuscular injection. The most common site is the deltoid muscle, in the upper arm. It's a good site for this kind of thing, accessible, not too deep, and for most patients, less intimidating than other options. I had him roll up his sleeve. Left arm. The deltoid sits in the outer part of the arm. You're looking for roughly the middle third of the muscle, a few finger widths below the acromion, which is that bony point at the top of your shoulder. You want to be in the thick of the muscle, not too high where you risk the shoulder joint, not too low where the tissue gets thin. I put on my gloves. Swabbed the site with an alcohol wipe. Let it dry. That part matters more than people think. Alcohol needs a few seconds to actually do its job, and if you inject through wet skin you're just pushing alcohol into the tissue, which stings more than it needs to. Daniel was looking at the wall. A good instinct, actually. Don't look, I said. And don't tense. I'm not tensing. He was absolutely tensing. Think about something else, I said. Asterisk, tell me about the house. Your sister's house, asterisk. He started talking. Something about the way the light comes through the east-facing windows in the morning, how he'd angled them specifically for winter light, how his sister had cried when she first walked in and saw it. His voice loosened as he talked. His shoulder dropped, just slightly. That was what I was waiting for. The needle I was using was a 23 gauge, an inch long, standard for deltoid IM. You hold the syringe like a dart, not a pen. Firm but not gripped. You stretch the skin lightly with your non-dominant hand, not a lot, just enough to give you a clean surface, and you insert at a 90-degree angle. Straight in. Confident. Hesitation is what makes it hurt. Once you're in, you aspirate briefly, pull the plunger back just a touch, check for blood. If you see blood, you've hit a vessel, and you withdraw and start over. No blood, you're in muscle. Good. Then you inject slowly. B12 is thick, viscous, a deep red-orange color that always surprises people the first time they see it. You don't rush it. You push the plunger steadily, evenly, giving the muscle time to accept the fluid. If you go too fast, it hurts. If you go slowly, most people barely feel it. He was still talking about the windows. I withdrew the needle in one clean motion. Pressed a cotton ball to the site. Held it there for a few seconds. Done, I said. He stopped mid-sentence. Looked at his arm. Then at me. That was it? That was it. He blinked. I felt something, but I thought you were still. I finished about 30 seconds ago. He stared at me. Then he laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one, surprised and a little sheepish. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks I put that off. To be fair, I said, capping the needle and disposing of it properly in the small sharps container I keep in my kit, you were also dealing with a train delay and a snowstorm. I was dealing with a train delay and a snowstorm before I met you, he said. Now I'm dealing with a train delay, a snowstorm, and the fact that I've been catastrophizing a 30-second procedure for 3 weeks. Welcome to being human, I said. Here's something I want to mention, because it comes up more than you'd think and because Daniel asked me about it after, when we were sitting with fresh coffee and the train still wasn't moving. B12 deficiency is genuinely underdiagnosed. It creeps up on you. Fatigue, brain fog, that feeling of being slightly disconnected from your own thoughts, people attribute it to stress, to poor sleep, to being busy. Sometimes it is those things. But B12 plays a critical role in nerve function and red blood cell formation, and when levels drop, the nervous system is the first to notice. The tricky part is that symptoms can be vague for a long time before they become obvious. Tingling in the hands or feet, unusual fatigue, mood changes. If you're vegetarian or vegan, if you're over 60, if you take metformin for diabetes, you're at higher risk, and it's worth asking your doctor to check your levels at your next visit. Daniel told me he'd been tired for months. Chalked it up to a difficult project. His doctor had caught it on a routine panel almost by accident. So this actually matters, he said, looking at his arm with new respect. This actually matters, I confirmed. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I feel like I should have gone 3 weeks ago. Yes, I said, very gently. You should have. He laughed again. I liked his laugh. It had that quality of someone who doesn't laugh easily but means it when they do. The train started moving again around 11:30. There was a small collective exhale through the dining car, you could feel it, this shared release of held breath. The older woman with the knitting didn't even look up. The child had fallen asleep over his notebook. Outside, the snow was still falling, but the trees were moving past the windows again, and that made all the difference. We talked for another hour. About architecture and medicine and the strange intimacy of both, how both professions ask you to see people in moments they'd rather keep private, and how that either makes you callous or makes you careful, and there's not much in between. He asked me if I ever got used to it. The seeing. I thought about that for a while. You get practiced, I said finally. You learn to hold what you see without being crushed by it. But used to it, I don't think so. I don't think I'd want to be *. He looked at me for a moment in that way people look at you when you've said something that landed somewhere they didn't expect. I think that's why you're good at it, he said. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. Sometimes that's the right answer. We were pulling into Salt Lake City just before 1 in the morning. The snow had lightened to a fine, almost decorative dusting. The city lights reflected off the low clouds in that particular amber way that cities have in winter, warm and cold at the same time. Daniel had a connection to catch, though at this hour I wasn't sure it would still be running. He was gathering his jacket, his phone, his bag. Thank you, he said. And then, after a pause, * for the shot. And for the other thing, *. I knew what the other thing was. The talking. The distraction. The making it smaller. It's what I do, I said. No, he said. It's who you are. He said it simply, without drama, the way you state a fact. Then he smiled, that slow, a writhing smile, and walked toward the door. I sat there for a moment after he left. The dining car was nearly empty. My coffee was cold again. Outside, Salt Lake City was doing its quiet winter thing, amber and silver and still. I thought about what he'd said. About being careful. About the difference between what you do and who you are. I've thought about it since, actually. More than once. There's one more thing I want to tell you, and it's practical, and it matters. When Daniel mentioned he'd been putting off the injection because he was nervous, I asked him what specifically he was afraid of. He thought about it and said, *, I don't know. The idea of it more than the thing itself, I think, *. That's almost always true. And I want to say something about that, because I think it's useful. The pain of an intramuscular injection, done correctly, is minimal. A brief pressure, sometimes a slight burning if the medication itself is irritating, gone within seconds. What makes people afraid is the anticipation, the loss of control, the vulnerability of letting someone do something to your body that you can't watch and can't stop. That vulnerability is real. It deserves to be acknowledged, not dismissed. What helps is this: when someone is nervous before an injection, don't tell them it won't hurt. That's a promise you can't keep and they won't believe anyway. Instead, tell them exactly what they'll feel, in order. * You'll feel a cold swipe, that's the alcohol. Then a small pressure. Then it's done. * Giving someone a map of what's coming takes away the worst part, which is the unknown. Also, and this is something I always do, give them something to do. Look at the wall. Count backwards from 10. Tell me about something. Occupied attention is relaxed attention. Relaxed muscle is easier to inject. It's not a trick. It's just how bodies work. And if you're ever the one giving an injection to someone you care about, a family member, a partner, a friend, and your hands are shaking a little, that's okay. Take a breath. The needle doesn't know you're nervous. What it knows is your angle, your steadiness, your intention. Get those right, and everything else follows. I made it to my conference. Sat under the fluorescent lights. Drank the bad coffee. Argued about the updated guidelines. But the thing I kept thinking about, in between sessions, was the train. The stopped train and the snow and the man who said he wasn't afraid of needles and was, a little, and the way the dining car felt like its own small world for those few hours, warm and enclosed and somehow exactly the right size. I thought about how much of medicine happens in spaces like that. Not in hospitals with their particular smell of antiseptic and anxiety. Not in clinics with their laminated posters and their forms to fill out. In the in-between places. On trains. In living rooms. At kitchen tables at midnight when someone calls because they're scared and don't know what to do. That's where the real work happens, I think. Not the technical work, though the technical work matters, it matters enormously. But the other thing. The being present thing. Find yourself rehydrating someone at home. Oral rehydration salts are better than sports drinks, lower sugar, better electrolyte balance, but a sports drink is better than nothing, and nothing is what we had except the vending machine. I got her a sports drink and a bottle of water. We alternated. Small sips. I talked to her about the train, about where she was going, about the shapes outside the window that were slowly becoming visible as something shifted in the sky. She was going to see her daughter in Los Angeles. The daughter had just had a baby. Patricia was going to be a grandmother for the first time, and she'd chosen the train because she'd always wanted to take this route, and she'd been so excited that she'd barely eaten or drunk anything for 2 days because she'd been too busy being excited. That, I said, is a very good reason to be dehydrated. She laughed. It was a good laugh, dry and real, the kind that comes from someone who has a sense of humor about themselves. By the time the train started moving again, 2 hours and 20 minutes after it stopped, Patricia had color back in her face and was on her second bottle of water and telling me about her daughter's apartment in Silver Lake, which apparently had a very small kitchen but excellent light. I went back to the dining car. The sky outside was doing something now, not quite dawn, but the deep blue that comes just before it, when the darkness admits its losing. The flat black was gone. There were plains, and then mountains, and then more plains, and all of it was slowly becoming visible. I thought about Marcus and his wife who talked about beef bourguignon. I thought about Patricia and the granddaughter she was going to meet in Los Angeles. I thought about the needle in my hand and the click of the auto-injector and the way Marcus had exhaled.